Some startups go up, others go down. Welcome to GeekWire's Elevator Pitch, presented by WestRiver Group, where 3 entrepreneurs pitch their businesses in the 32 seconds it takes to get to the top of Seattle's historic Smith Tower. We'll hear from 3 startup founders as they pitch their emerging businesses to our panel of leading investors and entrepreneurs. Let's meet our judges. Anthony Bontrager, a longtime entrepreneur, media executive, and venture investor who enjoys working with startups as managing director of WestRiver Group and cycling throughout the Pacific Northwest. Maria Colacurcio, CEO of Syndio, mom of 7, and fitness enthusiast who is committed to embedding workplace equity into the fabric of companies around the world. Kirby Winfield of venture capital firm Ascend. He's a Seattle entrepreneur with 2 IPOs and 2 exits under his belt and counts more than 80 startup investments to his name. The clock is ticking. Find out which entrepreneur has what it takes to make it to the top.
Hi, my name is Amina Moreau, and my company is Radious.
Welcome to Smith Tower. Going up.
Working professionals have spoken. Remote work is here to stay. The problem is that working from home isn't great for everyone. There are distractions and burnout, plus it's kind of lonely. But commuting back to a central office isn't the answer either. Radious is a B2B marketplace for on-demand workspaces down the street from your house. Imagine walking 3 doors down to your neighbor's guest house turned office and getting some work-life separation and seeing colleagues again right in your neighborhood. Wouldn't that be nice?
So there's been a lot of companies going after, what is essentially the co-working market, right? And this is a different take on that, clearly, but it's proven to be a very difficult business model to sustain. So how do you feel that Radious can change that dynamic?
A couple of ways. One way is that we simply don't have any leases. We don't own any buildings. We're a marketplace, so we're a middleman. So compared to some of our competitors who have those large commitments, regardless of what happens with the markets or with pandemics, for example, we're very nimble. The other side of it is that because most of our supply is residential, we have the suburbs cornered. It's where, after 2 years of working from home, employees want to stay. Whereas traditional co-working spaces are centrally located and require usually a longer commute at $5 a gallon, which people are just not wanting to do right now.
So you mentioned B2B. So who do you sell to in the enterprise? What size company? Who's the target? And what's the pitch to that person?
Effectively, it's any company that believes that offering flexibility to their employees is going to offer them a competitive advantage. Initially, it's a very foot in the door approach. We're saying, you just got out of a 10-year lease. We're not gonna sell another long commitment to you right now. Just book a space. And then once they've done that 2 or 3 or 4 times and they're seeing the value of it, that's when we talk to them about offering Radious spaces for free to their employees as a workplace benefit.
How do you deal with the cold start problem? Supply needs to probably be geographically pretty concentrated initially, but the demand is probably not geographically concentrated. So how do you juggle that?
Companies that are HQ'd in a city don't actually necessarily right away believe that they need us because they have an office. So what we found is if we can talk to larger companies that are HQ'd anywhere else, that have employees, even if it's a small concentration of 20, 30, 40 people in a city, then we can sign a contract with them and have them fall in love with it. And then as we expand into other cities where they happen to be, we have a relationship with them and we can expand together.
And you're going after the corporation, you're going after the enterprise themselves, not individuals?
Well, because we do have that booking by booking system that doesn't require a longer contract, we are testing going to individuals. But what we're finding is that our spaces are priced more for corporations to be able to pay for, and they have the budgets for it versus individuals.
So a bit of a land and expand, using the employees as kind of like your internal company influencers to get the corporation itself to
Yes.
expand into that.
It is with the corporations, but also in various geographies. It's a land and expand as well.
Do you have to look for spaces that are dual zoned residential commercial, or can you offer this up in pure residential areas?
We have several properties that are dual zoned like that, and that certainly makes life easier for some. But we're also actively in conversations with various municipalities about effectively changing with the times, because the pandemic forced people and companies to work out of their homes in extremely new ways, and that is going to persist in the long term.
Being in an office, doesn't just mean seeing other people or being out of your house. It means having secure Wi-Fi, coffee, snacks.
The comforts of home.
What's the user feedback you get today?
The most important things to these companies that are booking, especially for groups, are Wi-Fi, having AV for presentations, and simply having a either unique or, I would say, or comfortable place to be that's private. There are filters for things like printers, but also Wi-Fi speed, whether there's Ethernet in addition to the Wi-Fi, and we want to be able to give them maximum flexibility.
Yeah, curious, how do you find your super users? Like how, because I would imagine there's, at least at first, when I try to think, even if I just mentally scan my own neighborhood, the number of folks that would want to either vacate for the day or rent out an entire portion of their home. It's definitely not folks with young kids. It's definitely folks that have sort of like maybe that separate mother-in-law or something. How do you find your super users?
It's people, so we're talking about the host side.
The host, yeah.
We're poaching a lot of our hosts from Airbnb. People who already do this, they have investment properties, so they're not necessarily vacating their own home. They could, but they've got a condo, an apartment, a house, an ADU that is already there on the short-term rental market, but they want to supplement their income on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays,
That's it.
and in the winter, because vacation rentals dip then. This is the first time ever that short-term rental hosts have a way to supplement their income in an entirely new way during the winter.
This is it. This is the go-to-market. Like that's what it is. I ran a company called Dwellable. We did vacation rentals. We could never crack the off-season. We always thought if we could just crack the off-season, we could get all the supply that Airbnb and VRBO have. And there's a reason you can't crack the off-season for vacations. This is how you crack the off season, so vacation rentals become offices. So I think my feedback here would be that's the unique insight. That's a pitch that I think is absolutely resonates.
I agree.
Yep, that's the pain point.
And I think we're out of time. So thank you for pitching on GeekWire's Elevator Pitch today.
All right, thanks for your questions.
Thanks a lot.
The initial positioning of you can walk across the street and rent out your neighbor's office, that sounded creepy and weird to me.
Exactly.
I don't want people coming in and using my office.
I'd rather sit in my own kitchen. I don't know who would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then when we got round to, this is something for Airbnb hosts that they can leverage and utilize to fill up the off season, have daily rates that outpace what they get for an overnight guest, that made sense to me.
Yeah. I agree. I still wonder though about, why would you just want to walk a block or three away from your own home just to be in a different environment?
I think the
maybe I'm lazy. I don't know.
I think the leap you have to make. I understand now why she was talking about selling to the enterprise.
Yeah.
But I think the leap you have to make is that if the company says, "Hey, we've got this new, hotspot program, and here are the hotspots within, 20 miles of you."
Could be something there.
And then the last question, what's to stop an Airbnb
Well, that is the elephant in the
rolling out
room.
Airbnb off season or for office, or they've already got relationships.
Yeah.
So that would be my
Then
other.
you're crushed.
I can
because-
speak from experience. You don't want to compete with Airbnb.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Hi, I'm Sarah Haggard, the founder and CEO of Tribute.
Welcome to Smith Tower, heading to the observatory level.
The world of work has radically changed in the last 2 years. It is no longer assumed that it's easy to make connections with our colleagues, to share knowledge, seek advice, and problem solve real time. Tribute solves for this. Our peer-to-peer mentorship app for the workplace focuses on highly efficient micro 30-day engagements, helping employees problem solve real time with mentors for a moment, while creating a virtuous cycle of knowledge sharing across the organization. Our Slack and Teams apps have reached into over 300 million daily active users and have attracted enterprise customers, including Microsoft, Zillow, Coinbase, and Carta.
So tell us more. I want to know about how it works. So really deep integrations. It sounds like you integrate across a lot of different apps. Are you a combination of like a two-way employee communication platform with some like survey stuff baked in, or how are you getting the sentiment and how are you feeding that back?
Yeah, our apps today are integrated into Slack and Teams as well as other productivity tools, from scheduling to note-taking, and this is all done very intentionally to keep employees in the flow of work and to help them make those connections, for really those micro connections, for them to problem solve in moments of need and then get back to work.
So what does problem solve mean?
It means a lot of things to a lot of different people. At Tribute, we can help you create all kinds of connections, from finding an onboarding buddy if you're brand new to the organization, to seeking life advice if you're a new parent coming back to work, to even seeking career advice or help with a project or goal.
Let's say I'm a mom that just came back
Yeah.
and I'm in Slack and I'm having a conversation. Does it predict based on my language that I need to be connected with someone, or how does it suggest that for me?
Yeah, so we do capture both your lived experiences, both personal and professional, during the first run experience. So we'll know things like, you'll let us know that you're a new mom. Today, our ranking algorithm is really based on whether or not we believe that you will have a good connection with that person. But with this latest round that we've raised, we're actually doing natural language processing on those problem types so that we can get you connected to people who have similar problem types.
What about the cold start problem, right? You know, as you go into an organization, I mean, what is that, you know, that kinetic moment, right, where either a mentor or a mentee, right, starts to connect with one another? How do you get that rolling?
Yeah, initially we ask people to join and tell us about themselves. We don't ask people to immediately get into mentorships. It's really around share your story, share your lived experience, and is there a problem or goal that you're experiencing now that you'd like help with?
So for the companies you mentioned, like a Zillow or Microsoft, what's the usage pattern that you're seeing?
One of the things we learned early on in our product is that our marketplace of stories in a web app was very passive, with people browsing and meeting people, but not necessarily getting into a viral loop of helping each other. With our Slack and Teams app, we have seen engagement increase. We're seeing a strong signal of repeat usage of Tribute. And our expectation, at least initially, is that people will go from maybe 1 mentorship a year to 4 mentorships a year.
So talk to us a little bit about your pricing model and how do you monetize this?
Yep, we have a flat pricing model today. So mid-market, we charge $35,000 a year, enterprise $50,000 a year and up. And that really is intentionally designed for it to be an easy decision, for us to get additional logos and to encourage viral usage inside of organizations.
Is it a Slack bot?
It's more than a Slack bot. Today we have a web app that is a complement. We've got an analytics dashboard back to the company. But the Slack user interface, for us at Tribute, what really makes us different is we're obsessed with the user experience, the end user experience. We know that these HR tech tools and programs like mentoring stop and start inside of organizations because there isn't that continuity, because there's not a great user experience.
Is there an evergreen aspect to this content that you're kind of amassing, right? I mean, Kirby could have a question for a mentor that maybe
Never. I know everything. You know this about me.
You're right, though. He does know everything. So let's go to Maria.
She knows everything.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe it's me that it doesn't know
Thank
everything.
you.
Okay,
now
there
we're
we
getting
go.
somewhere.
Okay, so the question is someone comes into the platform, they get their question addressed, and then say 7 months later, someone else has that same thing.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity to go back through kind of like a history of content? Because it seems to me you're amassing a tremendous amount of content within an organization.
Yeah. Our initial use case and focus is to be a knowledge sharing application, not a knowledge management platform.
Sure.
But we believe that the half-life of knowledge is so short today that there could be new perspectives in those 7 months that you have. Rather than pointing you to a piece of content, we're really focused on getting you to a person, because part of this too of social learning is getting you to build your network, expand who you know, not necessarily just trying to point you to an answer or a piece of content.
That's a really good answer, because knowledge sharing versus knowledge management, if this were a knowledge management play, I think you get people kind of rolling their eyes a little bit, but that sharing piece is your secret sauce, so I'm glad to see you sticking with that.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So this is a tough space, right? Because it's such a, I think, a soft pain point for some companies. I mean, I get the knowledge sharing piece, which I think is a much better way to articulate what she wants to do than the mentorship play. But I guess I'm trying to get my head around, how much efficacy or usage are you really going to see with this that you don't otherwise see just simply through a Slack channel?
Yeah, and I think, the organizational network analysis space has struggled for a long time in figuring out, the promise always was, identify the folks in your organization that are the real get it done folks, the folks that you could not live without, the folks that behind the scenes, they may not have the title, but they actually are driving a ton of productivity.
Yeah, I think the kernel of the idea is really good.
Yeah.
And I think that there is definitely a problem to be solved in like a need state that exists, but I think being very tight about identifying the need state and how you solve the problem.
Hi, my name is Prem Kumar, CEO and co-founder of Humanly.io.
Welcome to Smith Tower. Next stop, 35.
Humanly helps high-volume hiring teams have more efficient and equitable remote conversations with job candidates. Where these conversations, such as interviews and screening chats, happen has changed, and now it's all measurable. Humanly automates 24/7 first touch with candidates and measures what's happening inside of remote interviews, such as what factors are leading to candidate conversion. This leads to better conversion, quality, and experience for job candidates.
So tell us a little bit more about how you do that, right? I mean, is it, I would imagine that you got some machine learning in the background, they're going through, and it's in a real-time basis going through the text-based conversation or the online conversation and then parsing it from there?
Really good question. So one important thing to us is leverage kind of what's happening technologically, but don't disrupt existing process. So we will show up on a web page with our automated chats or automated through an applicant tracking system and kind of act as that two-way NLP-based screening conversation. Once the human comes in, we'll sit right there on your Zoom call or team call and start measuring what's happening, provide feedback after the call, as well as real-time feedback, such as, are you talking too fast like I'm doing now, which disadvantages candidates where English is a second language.
What type of companies do you sell to? What size? And do you have customers today? And if so, can you share any names
Absolutely.
of who they are?
Yeah, generally we see this problem extrapolates at scale. So we're generally selling to high volume hiring teams. So think operations, support, we're getting bombarded with inbound and there's a lot of margin for error, especially in this distributed workforce. We're seeing pockets of success in SaaS companies, healthcare, tech companies I can list where we work with Microsoft, we work with the Seattle Storm in Seattle for some of their more high volume jobs. We also have started looking at a little bit in some of the hourly space.
Really interesting as a potential insurance policy for companies on process and compliance. Have you explored that avenue?
So I was talking to a company a couple weeks ago, not a current customer, but they were telling me how much money they're investing in that training, compliance training and bias training. I asked them, how are you measuring if the training's working? They had no answer. I can now tell them in quarterly business reviews, are you getting better and reducing risk?
Well, you just have this new movement around the civil rights audits, right? Yep. And things like that. So this could be another one of those tools that could actually help and be part of that, data stack or feed rather. Interesting.
What do you think about your use case, just knowing the environment we're in? It's an extremely volatile environment. Microsoft, just a couple of weeks ago, froze hiring, did a reforecast, but they also increased comp in order to retain their folks because talent is still very much in demand. So what are you thinking about in terms of changing your approach or thinking differently about how you go to market right now?
Yeah, great question. So when we started selling in 2020, COVID hit and there was a lot of layoffs, a lot of volatility, which is why we kind of wanted to go to spaces that right now we saw were almost proof of that. They were, I guess, recession proof in a way where there's still a lot of high volume. What we're seeing in this kind of dynamic is, yes, it's a candidate driven market in many ways, but you're still struggling to go through and quickly get candidates through. Like the time it takes you to get, we were able to tell one of our customers in Seattle here that by talking more about these 3 topics, engineers would convert at an 8% higher rate. And with that knowledge, the money they're already putting into attract is going further than what has happened before.
Can you sell to the Indeeds of the world as a software licensing opportunity?
Absolutely, and we actually have.
That's great. What do those contracts look like? That's actually really interesting.
Another thing that's happening right now, so it's really hard to find recruiters, right? It's harder than many IT jobs. And what is happening with recruiting, processing, outsourcing companies or staffing firms or Indeed, who is hiring employees to hire for their customers, is they're having to kind of go and outsource these recruiters they're hiring. They're spending less. So their customers are saying, okay, these are maybe not as experienced recruiters that you're giving us, but can you tell us that they're still doing a quality job? We can help ensure that those lower skilled, more entry level recruiters that RPOs are hiring, that Indeed's hiring, are now standardized in interviewers. They're not creating more bias, so we can help that model work. But our core is direct hiring teams that are hiring internally.
So five years from now, are you still focused primarily on that mid portion of the recruiting process, or are you expanding to different things? What's your vision?
Yeah, really good question. So 5 years from now, we will still be in recruiting. I do see other parts of this, like on the retention side. So we have some companies like Gravity Payments here in Seattle that's using us for stay interviews and exit interviews. So other things that have to do with that people life cycle, I don't see us going into like sales or support. And I do see us going up market. Part of that, quite frankly, is a year ago with a seed stage, we weren't ready to make that enterprise sale. We should be SOC 2 compliant by the end of this month though, so we'll see.
So tell us how you make money.
Yeah, so it's a SaaS product. So you're basically paying us a subscription. Generally, it's a year contract. You will have a platform fee plus a utilization fee on top of that. So right now, generally, as we move up market, the contract sizes are getting a little bit bigger. Part of it can be looked at as a replacement cost. So some of what we're doing, people are actually manually at these companies listening to interviews for quality purposes, or having recruiting coordinators that they hire to manually engage with all these candidates. So we can go in with a kind of replacement cost as well as look at where they've invested budget in diversity and in training, and show, hey, we can now measure your ROI on that.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today here at the GeekWire Elevator Pitch. This was really fascinating. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Prem.
Awesome.
Thank you. So I thought that was really interesting. One, because I do believe he's actually trying to solve a pain point that exists today in the hiring space. But you really brought out, I think, something really interesting is the adjacency, right? After the hiring, how can you use this information to continue to, the stay conversations or the exit interviews or things like that. I mean, it's all about learning. I found it really, really interesting.
It's why I asked the 5-year question, because when you're looking at AI specifically around bias removal in hiring specifically, that space is absolutely crowded as heck. I mean, you've seen a lot of it.
He talked about, the interviewing of female candidates, right? And the challenges on that. And if you're able to flag that for the interviewer at that moment, right, you can start to then, I guess, build some muscle memory for folks. Do you think that is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and I love the use case of a gong and sales enablement, because my mind immediately goes to, if you have an interviewer that's doing that, and they're also a sales manager that's training AEs, and the AEs are talking over women who are prospects, that's a huge issue.
It is.
So is there a way to connect the dots in human behavior to just say, you're in more calls than just interviewing candidates, and if you have this behavior here, you probably have it.
That's right. Welcome back, you three. great presentations by all of you guys. This was a tough decision for us. All of you guys presented very well, great business models, but let's get right into it.
Amina, so we talked a lot about Radious, and I think at the outset, the pitch wasn't quite clear to us, but became clear as you continued talking and as you went into it. So we saw this as an opportunity to carve out a market that wasn't focused on individuals, but as you are going B2B, talking to corporations, but providing that really clear positioning and messaging to your host audience that this is a way for you to capitalize on those off-season days and a way for you to make more out of your investment. And once that became clear, I think the value of what you're going out and building became very, very obvious to all of us.
So Prem, really like what you are doing, right? Especially, around the elements of, helping companies avoid the bias and start building some really good muscle memory to start avoiding that. And I think there's some long-term applicability there. One of the things that we really wanted to see, though, and I think this is just a little bit of advice, is that the focus that you have right now in that middle point is a bit too narrow, specifically given the robustness of the platform that you talked about, right? And I think there's a number of adjacencies where you can own more of that value chain. And I think that is something that investors are going to want to see, right? But otherwise, we thought you did really, really well. So thank you for your presentation today.
All right, Sarah. Great work. Tribute is definitely solving a real problem, and I think, Maria can attest to this as someone who runs a big and fast-growing organization. That keeping people connected and making sure that they're getting the right answers and the right help from their colleagues is a critical thing, and it's an unsolved problem. You need to find, I think, a killer use case, and I think you have a handful of really interesting entry points that you've identified. Can you come in and say, what we're really good? We're good at a lot of stuff. What we're really good at is getting moms and dads back to work. We were just we wanted to have a little bit more fidelity to that part of the pitch, but otherwise, great work.
We're also pleased to announce that for Future Workplace, Amina, you are the winner of the GeekWire.
Congratulations.
In our next episode, 3 new entrepreneurs will hop on board the Smith Tower elevator, competing for startup glory. Check out geekwire.com/elevator pitch for new episodes.